Friends, I done did it. I finished the Moleskine watercolor sketchbook. Finally. Okay, so because there are a few new subscribers here, and just in case anybody new happens to traipse into this video, let me give you a very concise backstory. I bought this last year as my first ever watercolor media surface to work on when I was first exploring and experimenting on how to use watercolor. I am by trade an acrylic artist, and yet I wanted to train myself how to do watercolor. So this was one of the first materials that I picked up in efforts to teach myself. And if you watch any of my previous videos wherein I am putting a painting in this book, you will learn that I did not like this book, like at all. It's big, it's got a lot of pages, the paper is pretty trash, at least for watercolor, at least in my experience, and thank God it is finally over. But this video is not going to be a total bummer. I'm actually quite excited to show you all of the beautiful things that I had managed to put inside this book. It's very important to me that I get to share the full journey from start to finish in completing this. It had been a goal of mine for 2021, and now in the start of 2022, I did at last finish the sketchbook. So we're going to do a tour, and I hope you enjoy. Grab yourself a cozy snack or drink of choice, and let's get to it. Whack! Here it is. Okay, so let's give a sort of cover tour before we get into the book. I put a whole bunch of stickers on it, some of which I had received from friends. My friend Ace Wizard, who streams on Twitch, they had given me these beautiful glittery stickers that have birds and leaves and pine cones and berries and all sorts of lovely naturey things. So I stuck a bunch of those on there. A great deal of these are stickers from REDBUBBLE from various artists like these two. We've got an art snack sticker. These two down here are from a collection of stickers I purchased from Shadoof Doodles, who is also on Twitch. I will put links to both of their Twitch channels in the description of this video so that you can go check them out if you like. And then there are some just botanical stickers on the back. A lot of these stickers, especially the larger ones, came from a friend of mine who had just like an absurd collection of stickers and let me take whatever I wanted. And my favorite that I managed to pull from that collection is this sticker right here, which I thought was all too appropriate for this book because I was ready to yeet this puppy out the window. All right, let's get stuck in, shall we? Okay. So I decided to like decorate the inside cover. I used Posca pens to put like my personal symbol here. I use this symbol to sign all of my acrylic paintings, but it's also just a little something that I thought I could use to spruce up the cover. And then I decorated the front page. This is actually an ink painting I did of myself. Self-portrait there, and it says watercolor gouache and ink 2021. I did this after the fact, after I'd done a few pages and had realized that this book was appropriate for more than just watercolor, so just wanted to fancify it. These stickers here are some more that I got from an Etsy shop, just cute little food stickers. And to get over my fear of the first page, I just did a nice big long set of swatches of my Sonnet Studio watercolors, which were pretty much the first legitimate set of watercolor paints that I purchased for myself. This is how you get over the fear of the first page. Just put this stuff down. It makes your page instantly pretty. Okay. This was inspired by an art YouTube channel, the name of which is slipping my mind right now, but I'll be sure to put the name up on screen and a link to the video in reference down into my description so that you can go see how I was inspired to do this color mixing chart, which is basically taking all of the paints that you're planning to use and doing one-to-one mixtures of every color with every other color, and it creates this lovely grid. This took me hours to complete. Like, it seems so simple, but just between all of the mixing and like doing raw color versus dilute color and making sure they were in the appropriate boxes, drawing out the boxes, and of course this is the entire Sonnet Studio palette, so it's 16 colors. So 16 by 16 is a number I can't do in my head. Editing Surina, help me out here. So yes, it creates another very beautiful page. that you can just fill up with color, but it requires not very much technical skill, and it's great for just getting a page out of the way. There is going to be a lot of me sort of like turning this book around because of the nature of it being kind of like landscape style. I do a lot of portraits, so we'll be pivoting this puppy around a lot. This is my very first portrait in watercolor ever, and I think I did really well on it. This is one of those things where, like, I personally can see the growth of my technique in watercolor just by looking at this image. I think I did very good at executing what I wanted to, but I can also see things that I would do differently. And in those days, like in the very beginning, I was still sort of getting used to like how I wanted to like border some of my paintings. Not all of the paintings in here are bordered, as you're going to see, but this one I thought was a little bit too thick. So I ended up reducing them down and finding a very consistent, like 1 centimeter all the way around the pages, so that, you know, I'm not taking up too much space on the edges, but I can also have enough room to put down what I want to. So here, you're kind of gonna notice, at least in the first half of this book especially, that there's gonna be some jumping around in the timeline, like this painting here, and then the subsequent painting here are both done within the same week, January 2021. However, this painting was done in March, and that was because at some point I had chose to go back and do paintings on the left side, so that I was doing paintings on both sides of each workable page in efforts to just like fill this puppy up with as much art as possible. It was very ambitious of me. And it comes with some pitfalls, as you'll see later, but I'm very proud of these paintings. This one in particular, I think, just like shows off how much technical skill I had gained in like the 2 months between this painting here and these sort of experimental pieces here. This one's so much tighter, whereas this one's a lot looser, and I think that they pair well together. It was a very nice page to put together. And this was in a video of mine. This painting is of my kitty cat Pixel, and again, very early days of me learning watercolor. You can tell that I was a little bit more intimidated, I guess, to do very heavy details on things because I didn't bother to like fill in anything that was on the shelves beneath her on this cabinet that she's sitting on. That's something that doesn't scare me nearly as much now, but you know, when I had first picked up watercolors for the first time, I was trying to keep it as simple as possible. But she looks very cute. Okay. Let me explain. So if you're familiar with the art channel Doodle Date, who I will be sure to put a link up into the cards of their channel. Please go check them out. I belong to their Patreon, and they have regular art prompts that the patrons can do. And the one for March 2021 was to hide a little pal in a cup. And, I mean, yeah, this was what I chose. I wanted it to be a much better painting because it's not. It's just not a very good painting at all. But I think the humor of it makes it kind of forgivable in the way. I don't know. Let's just move on, shall we? Okay, so here is my very first self-portrait. One that I'm like so proud of this even to this day. Like, I still look at this and think that some of the deeper shadows that I had kind of overdone look a little bit bruisey, but the contrast of the light on my face looks so stark that, again, I think it's forgivable. And of course, like I said previously, I can see areas that are in need of improvement from like the earliest days of me picking up watercolor, but like this was a smashing success considering that I had literally only ever done one other portrait, which you previously saw in watercolor in my entire life. So I was really, really happy with this. This one here is a gouache painting that I did using a limited color palette of, you know, blues and oranges and yellows. Very striking. I love those colors together. And this was actually from an art night that I had with some friends where we were doing things remotely, and I just decided to paint this. I'm proud of this. I'm proud of any painting or illustration that I ever do that does not have a reference, and that is exactly what this is. This is a reference-free picture, and I'm super proud of it. And over here, this is probably my favorite painting in watercolor that I've ever completed. It's a still life from a photograph that I took of my windowsill in my old apartment. It had a bunch of like bottles full of water and plants on it, and it was a beautiful picture that I decided to like give a good crack at making my very first legitimately detailed watercolor image. Now, I don't know how well you can see, but there are some blue smudges on this piece, like sort of right there, some down here, and that is because I soon discovered in using this book that because this is 200 GSM paper and it's not super thick being 200 GSM, and I think the content of the paper makes it so that if you wet one side, the other side gets wet too. So on the next page, there is a painting that I used a really big wet wash on, and it stuck these two pages together and unfortunately tarnished my favorite painting in this book, which is precisely why I'm ready to move on. But the good news is that I did manage to take a picture of this before it got ruined, so. Aw, my honey. So this is a portrait I did of my boyfriend. That's it, really. It's just a gouache piece. I'm happy with it. I think he's handsome. And then very appropriately on the other side is just a doodle page of me. I was testing out some of my water brush pens that I had recently purchased, and it's from Valentine's Day. I had a remote art night with Wesley, who is my boyfriend. There he is. And here is the fruit of my labor from that very evening. Ah, gouache. Okay, so I quickly discovered how much I love gouache. This was from a video that I did where I reviewed the Himi gouache that I had purchased. It was my very first set of gouache ever. Love this picture because I took this picture. The photograph is from a park that I went to in Wilmington, Delaware when I was going there to visit some friends, and it's just such a beautiful place, and I managed to capture it, and I'm really happy with it. And I love the colors of the Himi gouache. They pop so hard. They're just absolutely stunning. And then on the other side, it was the very next month that I decided to do sort of an ode to Arizona, because I used to live there and I find the landscape so striking and very colorful, in fact. So I thought it was a really good test of the Himi gouaches to see just like what kind of range you can get out of them in doing some of these landscapes. Whoops, skipped a page. Oh, okay, so here, again, jumping around in time, but this is the second of two paintings that I've done, the first two paintings I had ever done with White Nights watercolors. Pretty sure I spelled Nights wrong here. I think it's Nights with an N, but whatever. I love this piece. It reminds me of Michelangelo's David. And then this is the other Himi gouache piece that I did of my holographic disco-y Doc Marten shoes. This is like, again, like super happy because I drew these shoes. Like I used the picture of my shoes as a reference, of course, but like shoes are hard, yo. And I managed to draw them really well. And then when I painted them, they turned out even better. So, I mean, who can complain? On this side, I have a gouache piece that I did with the Arteza gouache, and this is from another video that I did of a limited color palette challenge that I had done using these very fun sort of like metaphysical color card things, and I'll put a link to that video up in the cards as well. On the other side, we have my very first ever professional review. I did a review of the Mia watercolors. Mia and Himi are sort of like the same company / sister companies, or under the same company umbrella. These were the watercolor sets that they had sent me, and I used them to draw sweet things because I think with my stomach. Ah, okay, so here, this is a gouache piece, another Twitch art streamer named James B. Barrow, who is a very lovely young man. He will, or did anyway, occasionally did 1 hour art prompts where he would give you just like a little phrase, and that was your prompt, and you'd have an hour to complete a painting. He mostly works in digital, I think, but I chose to do this in my sketchbook with some leftover gouache. I had it on a plate, and my prompt was floating mountain, so I got to create this very fantasy landscape. And then here is the very first of the White Knights paintings that I did with my first pass at that kind of like statue figure in a garden. Less happy with this. I don't like the look of this tree. His pose looks awkward. Let's just ignore it. Okay, plein air paintings. I have since learned that that is what it is called, plein air. They weren't super successful, but I have very fond memories of going out into nature last spring and giving it a good old college try of me sitting out in nature and trying to paint what I see. It's much more challenging than I had expected it to be because I am so used to working from photographic reference that, you know, when suddenly something is 3D in front of you, it's hard to translate. Again, solid effort. Okay, so this is from, I would say, one of my favorite videos that I've ever made. This is a painting that I did with coffee and Pegma Micron pens, but honestly it was the coffee that did it for me. That entire video was me creating paintings out of coffee and, you know, certain varieties of tea, including hibiscus tea, which I used to color the background of this page, and then I used my Himi gouache to create some lovely hibiscus flowers that I had found pictures for online. I don't know what was going through my head when I was putting this stuff in the background, but oh well. So this here is a swatch page from when I had received the Himi watercolor brushes that I had reviewed, another review video that I had done, and then of course because it was just like these sort of haphazard brush strokes, I couldn't stand the sight of it. I wanted some kind of art over top of it, so I just did like a very quick and dirty self-portrait using that coloring as the background, which is something that I do a lot actually. If I don't like the way that something looks, I'll just paint over it. Here, I gotta lift the book here. Oh yeah, baby. This is the Paul Rubens metallic watercolors. When I first bought those paints, I knew I wanted to do a painting that had nothing but them on the page, except for the ink background, of course, but yes. The shine is so satisfying. Oh yay! My mermaids! Okay. Train wreck. Let's just get this out of the way. If you guys recall that video, I had a minor meltdown over this painting. I was not a fan of how it turned out. Still am not, because if you turn it, she's got some pretty good ghostly features with that metallic face. So attempt number 2, I'm happy to say, came out way better, and now she's got a very shiny tail. Apologies for the censorship, but I did end up putting nipples on her breasts, and I know that YouTube is not a super big fan of nudity. You'll have to go and watch that video of mine if you want to see the original incarnation of this mermaid that did not have nipples. Ah, here we go. So here is my pride piece. This was another drawing prompt from the Doodle Date Patreon. It was one of those like choose the month of your birth and then choose the date of your birth and it'll give you like a goofy prompt, and mine was a fruit bat riding a horse and you had to use the pride colors, so that's what I did. And then on this side, these are 2 Arteza gouache paintings that I did when I was sick, from another video of mine where I just chose 2 of my most comfy images in my phone. And I created this little duo of cozy cats. Me and my boyfriend and my kitty cat Pixel. Okay, I had to take a quick break, but now I'm back. Let us resume. Okay, here we go. So this is a series of ink drawings that I did. Ink paintings, I should really call them, because I basically used watercolor painting techniques using India inks to create these food illustrations. And what I was going for was kind of like the style of anime art. Because my favorite thing ever is in watching anime movies and stuff where they show food and it just looks freaking delicious. I don't know how they do it. And I did my best to replicate that art style using inks. And I think I did a pretty good job. I'm really happy with these. It's something that I really like to do in general, is just painting and drawing food. Oh, we got a kitty. Gotta give the kitty some chin scritches. Gonna turn the page now, okay? Pixel. More ink illustrations here of plants and of mushrooms. I believe these were in a video as well, but you know, just some more enjoyable workings from references, photo references from the internet. And this is also, I think, from that same video where I did some still life drawings of coffee and pancakes when I had yet another remote art night with my boyfriend. Again, just very enjoyable to paint food. I'm a pretty predictable creature. Okay, so this is at the point in the sketchbook where I had started messing around with doing some fashion illustrations. And these are all from like pictures that I pulled off of the internet, but I would like recolor them to my liking. I was really just trying to get the feel for drawing and painting, the folds of cloth and stuff like that, and just sort of certain silhouettes that I thought looked very interesting. And then it gave me a little bit of freedom to sort of color them into my standards, I guess, instead of trying to copy them directly. So mostly I was just sort of referencing shapes, but then I would, you know, add my artistic flair to it when it came to coloring in. And this one's in watercolor. And then the one on the next page is all done in India ink. And what I did was I did the painting portion in ink, and then I used a dip pen in my various ink colors to do the outlines of some of the various areas. Like I used like a close approximation of her skin tone to do her skin, and same thing with her hat and her skirt. Used brown, different kind of brown for the boots, a sort of pale green for the leggings and stuff like that. It's really fun to do drawings like this, and I like how this one came out. This is some fan art. Doodle Date gets a lot of shout outs in this video. I mean, I have a lot to thank them for, honestly, because if it weren't for them, I would not have gotten back into drawing, because I like painting, but drawing, I think, is something that has always intimidated me a little bit as like a frequent practice that I can come back to, and I've definitely, especially within the last year, I've become so much more comfortable with just drawing. And this was a piece of fan art that I did from a video of theirs where Steph had filmed a video by herself using their camera and a stepladder so that she could do an illustration in her sketchbook while her boyfriend Adam was asleep, who is featured sort of off to the side here. That's what this lump in the bed is supposed to be. You know, I pulled some like references for like the stepladder and the camera and stuff from things that I found online. I made the camera way too big. I bet their camera's not as large as Stephanie's head, but I just thought it was just a sweet little love letter to them because I thought that video was adorable. Here's another fashion illustration. This one was like, I pretty much copied this almost exactly as I saw it. It was just a chiffon dress of, you know, various rainbow colors, and I wanted to see if I could copy that as best as I could using watercolor. And watercolor is actually a really good medium for that because of the transparency aspect of it. So this was super fun to do. You could tell I put a lot more effort into the dress itself than I did into any other part of the picture, but there she is. Okay, so if the painting of my windowsill is my favorite painting in here, this is by far my second favorite. This one was a very solid effort at like a detailed, it's not really a landscape, is it? It's more like a cityscape, a townscape, if you will, of this coastal town with all of these beautiful colored buildings. And, you know, I did my best. I gave it as much attention as I possibly could to like get the colors right, the shading right. It's a very simple picture, you know, one-point perspective is not super complicated, and I had a really good time taking my time to draw it out using a ruler and like as much precision as possible, so very proud of this. Another piece that I'm very proud of. This is yet again another picture that I did without any reference images. I drew this from imagination, and I can't really express like how deeply self-satisfied I am whenever I have a good drawing. And you know, it's a little awkward, the hands look a little goofy, and I feel like if he were to have his arm around her, they would be a little bit closer together instead of having like this gap of a few inches between them. But honestly, like, I can't really complain. That's just like a couple of nitpicks. I still think that this is a great drawing. Ah, here we go, a doodle page. I don't know what I was going for here other than just trying to like fill a page with nonsense and then color it in prettified. Just something fun to do on an afternoon, I guess. Ah, speaking of experiments, so these two images are some kind of like slapdash watercolor experiments that I was trying to do. This one has a little bit of white ink involved in it too, because I was trying to like add highlights or opaque white over a colored background, and you know, it turned out okay. I think the hand looks a little bit goofy, but this is actually a picture of me that I created into like this really crazed sort of splattery black portrait over this colored background. I think I even see places in here where I probably use some masking tape to like create these blocks of color. And I was just trying something. Like I was so eager to do something different, because up until this point I think I had done my best to be like perfect, that it was more in my interest to try to be like imperfect and try to see what things would look like if I were painting looser and a bit more freeform. And a lot of the paintings that are in like this chunk of time in this book are definitely representative of that mindset. So you'll find pictures like this one where I was just sort of like choosing these crazy colors at random, not really thinking too hard about realistic skin tones or anything like that. It was just like, what color would go good here? What color do I want this to represent? Really like loose brush strokes, trying to be more expressive. This one is also sort of like that, maybe a little bit more controlled than the previous painting, but definitely like with a more limited color palette. I chose to go with like mostly earth tones and blue, and I ended up really liking how this one came out. Love this one too. This is another one that I think is one of my favorites in this book, and I learned how much I enjoy painting hands in this one. This is like one of those that it was a style of watercolor that I was trying to emulate that I see from other people sometimes, where they use like what I like to call rainbow pastel. And that was just what I had done. I think I used pink, blue, purple, and yellow, and I just created an as close of an image to the reference as I could with only those 4 colors. And I think it turned out really lovely. Same thing with these guys, like this one I especially like because the reference picture was in black and white, and I ended up sort of bringing it to life with color, with a limited color palette. And this one is more earthy, while this one's a bit more technicolor, so they have like a good contrast here. Really happy with those. Many of you might remember some of these too, so it's mostly me repeating myself, but again, more loose experimental watercolor here, again with some ink over, but it's mainly watercolor. And then this was the last painting that I did of that series. These were all done on June 20th, I think. Yeah, June 20th. Oh, June 19th. Okay, so I did 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Yep. And those were all done on June 20th, so this was the last of the one from that day. And this was from a reference picture that I had taken with my phone of a house that used to be up the street from me where I used to live in Harrisburg, and I drew this by hand. Really happy with it. I like the loose landscape look and then the details in the house. I think that's a nice contrasting look. Another image that I did from imagination only. I think her body language is a bit stiff and awkward, but it's easily forgotten because of this sort of like sheer material in her shawl thing. I also just enjoyed playing around with making like background trees and stuff like that. Like this was super fun. This is all ink. This is all India ink, as is this picture. And this is another one of my favorites from in here. An ink painting that I yet again chose to outline and sort of like create a more illustrative style with like a dip pen dipped in my various sort of ink bottles that I have. And I love this picture so much. This is one that I would take a picture of and then like make prints of, so I might do that someday. Here's another, although this is I think just an ink painting. I think these are both just ink paintings. This one too. This one's actually, will it pick up on camera? Oh yeah, it will. I put in her dress and in her hair some of my iridescent inks.
so that she's got a little bit of shine to her. Yeah, come on now. I call this one the Jelly Green Giant. So this handsome fellow is one that I hand drew from a reference picture, but I think I kind of like goofed up his sort of like lean. I might have made his torso too long, I'm not really sure. And then I don't know what came over me or why I chose to do this painting only in green, but yeah, he's the Jolly Green Giant. I'll just leave it at that. And then these are both done with artesic gouache, and this is just a portrait that I found on Pexels of a young woman's eyes. And I love the fact that she had freckles, and it was a very beautiful close-up of her eyes. Okay, so at this point in my art sketchbook journey here, between these paintings and those from here on out, was a very long break that I took, where for 5 or 6 months I didn't touch art at all. So I broke my art block by doing this picture here, and there's a little bit of a sad story behind this. So I belong to the electronic music scene. I like to go to shows and stuff like that, and in December of last year we lost, you know, a great music producer who went by the name Charles I. He was pretty much my favorite artist, honestly, and he died on December 10th, and then a couple of days later I did this tribute piece in my sketchbook that just sort of lives in here because it still hurts. Like, the impact of losing Charles was really hard on the scene as a whole, and I could think of no better way to honor him in my own way than to paint him. So I chose to do it in here, where he will be like a private treasure forever in this sketchbook, and that gives it a lot more value to me, I think. Yeah, we miss you, Charles. I hope you're out there somewhere. And I hope you're making sick beats in heaven. And then I came back some like 2 months later to do yet another fashion illustration. This one was from a reference picture where the dress was actually black, and I thought that might be a little bit boring, so I decided to like make it this pretty pink gradient to green, very springy looking garment that I think turned out really pretty. And I decided to color match like her shoes and give her like a crown of flowers. Here we go. So this is yet another page where I decided to make these like 4 quadrants of landscapes, only this time in watercolor. So these are using the Mia watercolors, and the theme that I had chosen for these landscapes were mountainscapes. And I found some very pretty images online of some very beautiful and very colorful mountainscapes. So that's what these are. So this one is a painting that I did of a beautiful reference picture that I found online of a woman kissing like a marble bust, I guess you could call it, or an ivory bust. This is a really beautiful image to me, and this was like the first time in a really long time where I'd actually tackled realistic skin tones, especially with painting fair skin because of how many different varieties of tones there are. I find it really challenging, so when I execute it well, I'm so happy with it, and I'm very happy with this piece as a result. I also just really liked painting this bust because of it being sort of like a white material. I could really just focus on shadows and things. I took a lot of enjoyment in this one, and I'm super happy with it. Okay. As we get closer to the book, you'll see the nonsense start to accelerate a little bit. So on this night, I'd actually gone to one of the art Facebook pages that I'm part of. It's a group for watercolor artists, and I think there was like this prompt from the group admins that was for neurographic art, and that's when you put scribbles over a page and then you round out all of like the places where the lines intersect, and then you can just color it in as you like. It's a very meditative exercise. So I decided that this was going to be that over here. And there's a little bit of metallic paint in there somewhere, sort of popping. I'm not sure how much of it will actually show up on camera. I'm doing my best here to try to show it to you, but yeah, I was just sort of, you know, filling in color without any rhyme or reason, and I knew I wanted to do it only because I was, at this point, super gung-ho to finish this book. I only had like a handful of pages left, and I thought, heck it, I'm just gonna put a spread of just nothing but scribbles and color, and it's not going to be anything perfect. Again, this was highly experimental. On this page, I had used so much daggum table salt to try to get some of those very attractive watercolor textures, but I think because of the way that this paper is constructed for being like too thin and probably mostly cellulose, I don't think that the salt was as effective as it could have been. Like, it's okay, there you can see some texture, but honestly it just sort of like glued itself to my paper and made it feel like sandpaper, so it's super gritty, but still fun to like throw color around and be very careless about it. Just another portrait. At this point, some of these portraits really don't have like a purpose, they're just there to look good. So I'm happy with this one. And then this one's actually a portrait of a friend of mine, and this is yet another piece that I did all in metallic paint on a black ink background. And I love how like weird and alien this looks. I didn't intend for it to look this way when I started it, but I guess because of the metallic colors, it just has this very strange extraterrestrial look to it. Can't complain, I think it turned out pretty cool. Alright, we're in the home stretch, you guys. This is an ink portrait, again using a limited color palette, I think. And then this one is in watercolor, but I did the background first and then did the sort of like only black paint portrait over top of it so I could just focus on shadows and stuff. I really like doing stuff like this. It doesn't require a whole lot of color mixing, but I can still focus on values and stuff. That always tickles me. This is a landscape that I did from an image in my phone that I took of the riverside in Harrisburg where I used to live in autumn of last year. And I've always really wanted to paint this image because there's this very attractive and very quirky tree that sort of leans over the cliff there that sort of looks over the river, and it's just really pretty. I also got an ink smudge on it right there. Arg. I just want to scrape it off, but I know I can't. Alright, so the last of these paintings, the last two that you're going to see, I completed yesterday at the time of recording this video. And this was the first that I did, and it is a stained glass window. My reference picture was very religious, and I wasn't really fond of that, so I decided to change it to kitties. So we've got a little paw print up here, some cat eyes, and some various kitty poses, including a kitty butt. And then I used the reference picture to give me the desired lighting effects that I could then add to the border of this window. But other than that, that's pretty much all I used the picture for, was the colors. The rest I just kind of pulled out of my rear end and my heart, for I do love kitties. And then this one is the one that I finished last night, and this is a mandala, which up until last night I realized that I hadn't actually done in this book at all. Where can I tip this? Oh, there you go. You can see I added some metallics to it, so it's got a little bit of a pop. I'm super happy with that. This took me several hours. This was like a 3-hour project of me painstakingly creating this mandala and then very carefully painting it in. And, you know, it's not perfect, but it's pretty and it filled the page very beautifully. I really like the color palette that I chose of like browns and purples and greens. Not a bad choice if I do say so myself. And then from here on out, we're just going to see some pages, mostly of swatches. So I had to do like a color wheel at one point, and this was something that I put in here from pretty much the very beginning of me using this book, as well as some of these other pages where I was doing like experiments with coffee from that coffee and tea painting video. I put some washi tapes I'd purchased in here. I was experimenting with some of my inks. These were some more swatches in the background here that I did with some of the water brushes that I had purchased. And then I just put like a portrait over it because I can't stand the sight of just like a wasted page for some reason. And then the very back page here is my experiments with different watercolor painting techniques on this paper. When I finally figured out how frustrated I was with the paper in this book, I decided to put her to an actual test to see how well it would perform using a combination of different kind of test templates that I had found online, and this was sort of the one that I came up with. So you got wet on wet, wet on dry on wet. Oh, hold on, let me start that again. So you've got wet on wet, wet on dry, dry on wet, dry on dry, staining colors and how they lift, non-staining and how they lift, how granulation shows up, how you can soften colors, gradients, gradient with water, so just using one color and gradienting it to white, a wash of color and how it will show up on this paper. This is not part of that. This, I think, was me attempting to use a watercolor lifting tool, which didn't work out so well, salt, and glazing one color over another. So that's just for you nerds out there. If you ever want to see how your watercolor paper performs, you are welcome to take this. It's just a sort of amalgamation of different templates that I had found online. And then some more food stickers in the back, some pretty, these are like transparent floral stickers that I found online that I purchased for myself. Some more glittery stickers from my friend Ace. And then this weird, weird thing that I cut out of a different watercolor book that I had with, I think it was a Canson book, and I think I use it now for swatching all of my art supplies. But I did create this one weird, I think this is an ink drawing of a very awkwardly posed person. But she lives in the pocket in the back, and we don't talk about that. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's it. It's done, you guys. All right. So now that this has been finally completed, I just have some closing thoughts. First of all, thank you to everybody who has been here from the beginning and has sort of seen my progress in learning watercolor since I picked it up at the beginning of 2021. It means a lot to me that you guys are here to support me, and I'm sure that if you understood my frustrations with using this Moleskine book, that you are celebrating alongside me, because now I can move on to other watercolor sketchbooks that I've had sitting in my stash for far too long that have been begging for me to use them. So it's time for me to give them much desired attention. I also want to say that I don't think that this is like a bad choice for inks. That's actually something that I wanted to add, like a piece of criticism, positive criticism that I have for this watercolor album, and that is that while I don't like at all how it responds to watercolor, it works pretty dang well with inks. In fact, I love the way the inks show up on this paper. Gouaches, kind of a gamble, especially if you're going to be painting on both sides of the paper. Watercolors, obviously you're gonna run into some issues, but my ink drawings and the like the paintings, like where's the one that I did with the mushroom? Because that's a really good example of how like this was like the perfect surface. There we go. Like I didn't have any issue at all creating this. So if I ever do end up buying this exact copy or something like it with a similar paper quality, it will be for inks only. So I just wanted to throw that piece of information in there. And I really hope that you enjoyed this tour. It's the first of its kind. This is the first sketchbook that I've ever completed in my life, so honestly, it's worth this momentous video, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it inspires you the way that I have been inspired by other people's sketchbook tours. This is the kind of stuff that I live for in the art YouTube sphere, so I'm giving it back now, and that feels really, really good and very satisfying. Okay, that's it for me. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more of my future videos. And until I see you again, ciao everybody.